There are informational pathways that are practically guaranteed to get results quicker and safer, saving both time and money by leveraging information against information. And that is what I call intelligent integrators. Or just intelligent integrator. Good morning, I'm CJ, and I'm a scientific consultant. So, skipping skepticism. This is just kind of like a little bit of a forward. From the self-proclaimed skeptics I know, personally and famous ones, I've noticed they seem to misunderstand a point because of their own misinterpretations or assumed projected unclarified biases. And it's unclarified because it's like maybe they've added in something from like sometimes what I saw is like they're speaking to a person, but they're bringing someone else's outside ideas inside the conversation, and they're not actually speaking to the person about their own ideas, but what somebody else's interpretation of that person's ideas are, instead of just asking the person who's right in front of them. And then so that's what it's like, unclarified biases that they come into with the conversation, as well as just basic misinterpretations of the information for a variety of reasons. And then all of these, which causes them not to ask good questions, meaning the questions essentially just, it takes them longer to get to the truth quicker. And then so here's the kind of like an example of that. So you can scroll down. Okay, so let's say there's a claim. A skeptic, they will probably say like, oh, well, that isn't true. And then they'll either just like ignore it because it's like, you know, and give like some sort of excuse why. It's usually like time, which makes a lot of sense, don't get me wrong, for a lot of things, where it's like they're not going to essentially waste time on something that they don't think is real. But the issue is when they discourage other people who are using their time a certain way, or if they're making fun of certain people who are trying to get into something that they think is like woo-wooey or something like that. When they discourage that kind of behavior, all it does is that it shrinks their availability of what they can actually do in science, because technically science is able to touch all aspects of life, right? I believe it does do that. Like it's yeah, like it does do that. Like there's really no way to sugarcoat, like that's what it does. Like it's gonna prove like how everything exists. Like it's not how everything kind of incorporates it into itself, right? That's not really like an issue. So it's just kind of like, how fast are we going to get to the point where we can actually utilize some of the really awesome stuff, is really kind of what I'm trying to speed up here. So let's see. Okay, so they say that isn't true. They either ignore it or say it's an excuse. Maybe they discourage other people from doing it, right? But at the end result, that's going to take them time to wait in order to kind of go back and cycle through to that claim again, which again takes a lot of time, right? Sometimes in order to revisit a topic, it's like days, weeks, years, decades, or even centuries to revisit a topic, right? Whereas another path that a skeptic would probably take is they explore it to disprove it, and then they realize, oh, they tried to disprove it and it fails, or maybe it works. And that's kind of a separate track, but I didn't want to really add this where it's like, oh, well, they did disprove it, but it's like the way that they disproved it wasn't what the person actually meant. Like a good example is, what's his name? Bohr. He was trying to show Einstein's ideas didn't work, but if you look at his model of what Einstein's ideas was, remember the misinterpretations, like he didn't understand it. He didn't have the mirror that Einstein said was necessary in order to do the experiment. So literally, he was talking about an idea that wasn't Einstein's. Like that's what he was. He was disproving something Einstein didn't make. And that's what happens when you do misinterpretations. It's like you're not talking about anything that the person said. You're just talking about or what they meant or anything. In that case, it's pretty clear cut. Like the mirror was missing. Like he had a box, but there was no mirror. Whereas Einstein's had the box and the mirror, and Bohr's just had the box. So it's like this Like, these literally don't equal. It was missing like literally like half the equation. So that's why I just didn't include that. But so they tried to disprove it, and then it fails to disprove. And then sometimes, of course, like they could disprove it and it ends up being right. But I'm speaking about the things that are pretty obviously true. It's just a matter of like, okay, well, like how, why, and like what exactly is this? Because it's like if a bunch of people are seeing a specific thing, we already know what it is, like whatever they say it is. It's just a matter of like why and how. So that's kind of like what I'm talking about. Not necessarily like, yeah, I guess you technically could use this for anything, but anyway. So we'll just stick to this basic format here, because it kind of includes most of what you're probably going to be encountering. So they tried to disprove it. It fails, and then they say, well, why didn't it work? That's so, what? Oh, interesting. And then they go all the way back up to whatever the intelligent integrator was going to do, which was, they go back to, wow, that's really interesting. Whereas this guy over here who just ignores it, thinks it's silly or something like that, over time, the weeks and decades, they're eventually going to go back into this claim and then go down the intelligent integrator, or just kind of go off another side path, which is like, yeah, I don't even know what to do with this, which is like a lot of, I believe it was Hank Green it was somebody, I forget exactly who, but some person said that they probably need to apologize to the people who thought that UFOs were real, because obviously there's a there, and he wanted to make a public apology saying that like they've been mistreated essentially, because there is something there. But the only way that you get to the apology of that is if you just kind of ignore it, you think it's silly, and then you bash other people from doing or looking into something, and then that just elongates the time of when we know that UFOs are real. It's just a how and what is happening. I mean, sorry, not what, how and what, how and why it's happening. So eventually, what I'm trying to say is that the informational pathway that you choose is either going to elongate the process, or you could just skip to the most interesting thing, and then that can quicken things very, 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 very quickly. So one of the ways that you could do that is that you could just explore openly, which eventually you'll get there. So even if you do think it's interesting, a lot of people, they just kind of explore openly without no clear like pathway or anything like that, and that's fine. Because eventually they're going to understand like everything that has to be done. But an even faster pathway is to say, okay, if the claim is true, then it could show blank. And then this is kind of like what I say is the first questions, which is like, what's the minimum amount of information required in order to suggest something is true? So actually, let me add that in. What's the minimum information and that's what we're working on right here for today. And the reason is because, like, if you can't get to this level, then a lot of the coming up stuff is going to be kind of hard to digest, essentially. Interesting. Okay. So we'll do magenta. So it's a minimum amount of information required to suggest something is true. So if claim is true, then it could show blank. And then this is kind of like, this creates an empty area that can only be filled if it's true. So basically what you're trying to do is that you're actually just trying to skip the information. So let's say if you think UFOs are false, then what you try to do is like, okay, if UFOs are real, one of the two things that can be true is that it's either really, really common, or it's well, I actually forgot the other possibility, but if you could just do the most ridiculous example. It's like, okay, so it's common, so that means that there's probably a bunch of stories that where aliens came, they landed, and they probably talked to people. So basically what you would do is that you would say, okay, if this claim is true, then we should be able to see stories across all of time where aliens are speaking to people. And then so basically you would look into that, and you'd look into that, and then you'd get cases like the Virginia case. You'd get cases like the stuff that that Jesse Michaels talks about. You'd get all these anecdotal cases, and you'd be like, okay, well, you just, or even just if we don't even talk about sightings or seeings, just people seeing things. If you just go to the CIA's website, it's like there's like 400 plus documented cases of scientists, farmers, regular people, people with crazy high degrees, all talking about like seeing various things, from balls of burning hydrogen in the sky, stuff like that. That was following them. So it's like, for one scientist in like Africa, he said that he saw a ball of flaming hydrogen that was following his car. And he would get out of his car, look back, and then the ball of hydrogen would float backwards, and then he would get back in his car and start driving, and then the ball would get closer to his car. And then he did that like, I think like 3 different times, where it would go farther away and then come back, and then so there's something there, right? And then so it's like you basically create informational holes that can be filled. So this where you can kind of skip all of this, and you could just go straight to the meat and potatoes. So I call it start creating information holes, but a different way, a more scientific way that I made a word that could be used is Contra-Instantiations, which is basically the deliberate attempt to instantiate a state or object that a theory declares impossible. So if you don't believe aliens are true, then it's like, okay, that means they're true and they're everywhere. So let's just go to look for cases where people are talking to them. And there's a bunch of those cases, a bunch of anecdotal cases, and a bunch of cases where it's like, this person kind of seems a little crazy, but also a bunch of cases where it's like, oh, well, the people are alive and they're over there, and like they don't really seem that odd. Another word that you could use for it is paradox engineering and information holes. This also can work for basically anything, so not just like stories and all this other stuff, but like a lot of the what people call it like is woo-woo and stuff like that, which to me is just science that hasn't been verified yet. And a lot of that woo-woo stuff, it's pretty, I've even created like some falsifiable stuff. So if you wanted to see some falsifiable experiments for a lot of that stuff, just let me know. But the only difference between a self-proclaimed skeptic and everyone else is it takes skeptics longer to come to the same conclusions, and then that's just kind of what I've seen. Because of all of this, right? So it's like they're on this track thinking that something doesn't exist, when they could just literally, anyway, they're going to come to this side anyway. They could just go straight to this side, look for the claim either that way, or look for the minimum amount of information, or they can make an information hole, or they can explore openly. So they have 3 areas. Definitely this one is going to be a lot faster with the contra-instantiations, both for, it could work for mechanical or non-mechanical designs, and they could get to their answers way, way quicker, like insanely fast, and it's worked very well. So hopefully this helps, and then you have the little gray alien waving to people. Because he's like, hey, what's up? That's what happens when you get the contra-instantiation. Get to them quicker. But yeah, it also works for basic things too, like mechanical designs and whatnot. So there's really no limits to that, because what I like to do is I like to create like playgrounds. So this is like a nice little playground where you can choose how you wish to play within that. And so go out and have fun. If you guys discovered anything, or if you used this or showed this to anybody and something interesting happened, put it in the comments, or just, let me know somehow. It'd be really cool. Hopefully this helps. Skipping skepticism. Take care. Oh, and if you wanted one little final bonus is if what is and isn't true doesn't even really matter. So if you believe the woo-woo, if you don't believe the woo-woo, if it is or isn't true, it literally doesn't matter because both sides of the equation can be utilized to whatever you want. So based on the degrees of why it's not true and the degrees of why it might be true or is true, you can use either side of the equation to prove and disprove anything that you want, ultimately helping and quickening this process. So even if you encounter something that isn't true, it can all be utilized very well, and also in a way to speed things up. It's all about how to intelligently integrate it, and Contra-Instantiation basically takes care of the majority of that. But yeah, so hopefully this helps. Peace out.